He fired her at 9:47 on a Friday in March. Not at the end of service. Not in the morning before the team arrived. Not in the quiet of a closed restaurant when the chairs were still upside down on the tables and the city outside was doing something other than watching. At 9:47 on a Friday in March with 34 covers still seated. With the reservation line running 3 months out. With her signature dish, a slow-braised short rib with a gochujang tamarind reduction that no food critic in Houston had yet found the right words for. Plating on station 3 with 40 seconds left on the clock. He came through the back entrance the way powerful men enter rooms they own. Without noise. Without announcement. Without the particular performance of arrival that lesser men require to establish that they have arrived. The kitchen registered it wrong in the first second. Not because Soo-Han Lim had never been in this kitchen before. He had been in it many times. He owned the building. He owned the restaurant inside the building. He owned, technically, everything inside the restaurant including the custom pass she had installed in month 2 when she decided the original one was 4 inches too low and submitted the invoice without asking. He had approved the invoice without comment. The kitchen registered it wrong because he had never come during service. Not once in 3 years. And every person at every station, Marcus on fish, Yolanda on garnish, Deshawn running the window, understood this the way professional kitchens understand things. Not through information, through the body. The way a room reads a temperature shift before anyone checks a thermometer. Something is different tonight. Something worse than the rules is already here. Renee Okafor was 41 years old. She was standing at the pass plating the duck confit when he walked in. Her hands didn't stop. She was a black woman from 3rd Ward, Houston, who had spent 14 years building a reputation in every serious kitchen in Texas through a combination of technical precision and an absolute refusal to compromise what she believed about food for anyone who signed her checks. She had rebuilt 3 times before she was 38. The first time after a restaurant partnership dissolved over a disagreement about sourcing. She wanted Gulf Coast shrimp from a specific boat captain in Galveston. Her partner wanted the cheaper frozen option and the margin it produced. She packed her knife roll in one afternoon and was on the phone before she reached the parking lot. The second time after a building sale. 22 days notice. She spent the first evening making a list of everything she needed to do and started doing it the next morning. The third time after a health crisis, 8 weeks out, surgery, recovery, the specific terror of lying in a hospital bed calculating whether the knowledge in your hands was still there when you couldn't use them. She knew this the way her grandmother had taught her to know things. Not by testing them constantly, but by trusting the years that had built them. She came back in 6 weeks instead of 8. When Soo-Han Lim's property manager had called 18 months ago, she was running the hotline at a River Oak steakhouse, performing at a level so far above what the room required that it was almost a private act. The kind of discipline that has no audience and requires none. The terms he offered were the only terms that had ever mattered to her. Full creative control. Her own hiring decisions. A budget she had never seen in writing before and spent 2 minutes confirming was real. And one clause, stated once, not negotiated, not modified. No interference with what happened in her kitchen. Her pass. Her call. Every decision made from what she believed was true about food. And nothing she didn't. She said yes before the property manager finished the sentence. Before we go further, if you're new here, this channel is where we tell the stories that don't make the news. The ones that happen behind closed doors, in professional kitchens, in boardrooms, in the spaces where power meets craft and only one of them walks out whole. Subscribe now so you don't miss what's coming. And drop a comment below. Have you ever been fired from something you built? Tell me, because this story is going to mean something different if you have. She built the kitchen from nothing. Not from a template. Not from what the previous tenant had left behind, which was a commercial kitchen designed for volume catering with no soul and no logic she could understand. She gutted it in the first 3 weeks. Repositioned every station. Installed the pass she wanted. Built the sourcing relationships herself. The boat captain in Galveston was now her boat captain. The small farm outside Brenham that ran heritage breed pigs. The spice importer in Midtown she had worked with for 7 years and trusted with her eyes closed. She developed the menu over 6 weeks of Tuesday nights alone in the kitchen after close. Testing. adjusting, tasting with the focused rigor of someone who understood that what she was building would either be true or it would be nothing, and she had no interest in nothing. The short rib came on a Tuesday in October 11 at night, a version she had been working toward for 3 weeks. She made it, plated it, stood at the pass in the empty kitchen, tasted it and set the spoon down. That was it. Not because it was done, because it was right. There is a difference, and she had spent 14 years learning to feel it. The reservation line hit 3 months within the first year. She didn't talk about it. She didn't post about it. She found out on a Thursday morning when Marcus showed her his phone, a food column in the Chronicle that had run overnight. She read it once, set the phone down, went back to prepping her mise en place. Marcus waited for a reaction. She looked at him, back to work. The reaction was already behind her. It had happened at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday in October when she tasted the short rib and set the spoon down and the kitchen was empty and nobody saw it. The review was just confirmation of something she had already finished deciding. Soo-han Lim had owned this building for 9 years. He was 44 years old. Korean-American. Born in Dallas, raised between Dallas and Seoul, educated in the particular discipline of his father's world from the age of 16, when it became clear that he was the one who would carry it forward. His older brother had left for Vancouver and a quieter life. His younger sister had married a lawyer in California. He had stayed. He was not a man who explained himself. He had learned early that explanation was a form of weakness in his world, that the man who stated his reasoning was the man who invited argument, and argument was a luxury that certain kinds of business could not afford. He was composed the way certain men are composed, not as a performance, not as a style, as a working condition, built from years of rooms where the wrong expression at the wrong moment cost more than money. He had come into this kitchen on a Tuesday in November, for months after she opened. Late, 11 at night, through the back entrance. She was breaking down her station. The team had gone. He stood in the center of the kitchen and looked at it the way she looked at kitchens. Measuring, cataloging, reading the structure of a thing before deciding what it was. He said, "The table at 7 had a complaint about the short rib." She said, without looking up, "The short rib was correct." He said, "They said it was too rich." She said, "Then they ordered wrong." He stood there for a moment. Then he left. He came back Thursday. Same hour. He sat in the empty dining room with a phone and didn't speak to her. She sent a plate through the pass, the duck she was still working through, no explanation, and watched from the kitchen window. He ate all of it. He left without a word. By January he was there every other week. Not eating, not speaking to her directly, just present in the way that powerful men are present in spaces they own. And she cooked and he watched, and neither of them discussed what the arrangement was. "I need you to stay with me here because what I'm about to tell you changes everything you think you understand about why he fired her. Hit that like button right now. Not because it helps the algorithm, although it does, but because this story deserves to be seen. Keep watching." What neither of them knew, or what she didn't know, and what he knew only partially and chose not to examine fully, was that someone had been watching the building. Not the restaurant. The building. For 6 weeks. 2 men had been sitting in a gray sedan on the block. Different men on different nights, but always 2, always the same sedan, always parked at an angle that gave them a direct line to the back entrance she used to receive deliveries every Tuesday morning. Soo-han's head of security, a man named Cho who communicated almost entirely in short written notes left on his desk, put the first photograph on the desk on a Monday morning in the 2nd week of March. Not a photograph of her. Not a photograph of anything inside the kitchen. A photograph of the sedan. A license plate, and below it a name. The name was one Soo-han recognized immediately. The way you recognize something you have been hoping would not become necessary to deal with. Cho put a second note under the first. They have been here 6 weeks. They are not watching the restaurant. They are watching what comes and goes. If they have enough, they don't need to come inside. Soo-han sat with the notes for 4 hours. The restaurant had been the cleanest thing in his operation. Not because it was perfect, no restaurant was perfect, but because she had built it with a kind of integrity that had no interest in anything outside itself. She sourced correctly. She paid her team correctly. She ran a kitchen that had no debts to anything except the food on the plate. It was the cleanest thing he had. And it was also, now, the most visible. A 3-month reservation line. A food column. A kitchen that people drove from Austin and San Antonio to eat in. He had encouraged all of it. He had approved her invoice for the custom pass without reading it carefully because he trusted her judgment about her kitchen. He had watched, from the dining room on Thursday nights, a woman build something genuinely true inside a building that contained many things that were not. The problem was that the people in the sedan did not distinguish between what was true and what was not. They distinguished between what was visible and what wasn't. She was visible. The kitchen was visible. The reservation line, the column, the name of his building in a food publication, all of it was a map of where to look. He ran the calculation the way he ran every calculation that cost him something he didn't want to spend. Remove the sentiment. Identify the variables. Assess the cost of each outcome. He ran it twice. He got the same answer both times. The third time he ran it, he used harder assumptions. Stripped everything that was not strictly operational. Assumed the worst about what the men in the sedan had already documented and who they had already told. Same answer. He picked up his phone. He put it down. He sat for another hour. Then he picked it up again and called Cho. He told Cho what he needed. He told him when. He did not look at the photograph again. What Renee had built in 18 months was not just a kitchen. It was a system. Every station designed for the specific person who worked it. Marcus on fish because Marcus had hands that understood delicacy without being told. He felt the moment a piece of protein was ready the way a pianist feels a note before it sounds. Yolanda on garnish because Yolanda was the most technically precise person she had ever worked beside. The kind of cook who could place a microgreen to within a millimeter of where the plate required it and be right every time without measuring. Deshawn running the window because Deshawn understood the pace of a full room the way a conductor understands an orchestra. When to push, when to hold, when to let a course breathe. She had also built a recipe box. This was not unusual. Every serious chef maintained documentation. What was unusual about Renee's recipe box was the level of specificity inside it. Not just ingredients and ratios. The temperature at which each sauce broke and the precise intervention that pulled it back. The sourcing notes, not just which vendor but which contact at each vendor, which days each product peaked, which weeks to avoid and why. The plating diagrams, hand-drawn, with measurements in both inches and millimeters because she had worked with cooks trained in different systems and she built for all of them. She had been adding to it since month 1. She had never planned to leave it. It was documentation for herself. The living record of a kitchen she intended to run for as long as the building and the business allowed. She did not know, on the Thursday before he came, that she was 3 days from the last entry. The last entry was a note about the short rib. She had made a small adjustment to the braising liquid, a half-ratio change in the tamarind component, a decision she had been circling for 2 months and finally committed to on a Wednesday night test. She wrote it down at 11:30, standing at the pass in the empty kitchen, in the specific handwriting she used for recipe notes. Small, precise, no abbreviations. She tasted it one more time before she wrote it. Then she closed the box and put it in its place on the shelf above the pass where it had always lived, where she could reach it without looking. She didn't know it was the last entry. She went home. She slept. She came in Friday morning, ran her prep list, received her Tuesday delivery. The boat captain from Galveston was a day early, which happened sometimes in March when the weather moved, and began her service prep. At 9:47, Suhan came through the back. We are exactly halfway through this story, and I promise you the second half is where it breaks open. Before you keep watching, drop one word in the comments. Just one word for what you're feeling right now. I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. This story is almost over, but there are more like it coming, and you don't want to miss them. The kitchen registered it wrong in the first second. Not because Suhan had never been here. Because the hour was wrong. The night was wrong. Friday at 9:47 with 34 covers still seated was not a time any owner who respected a working kitchen would choose. The only reason a man like him came through that door at that hour was because something worse than the service was already in motion. Every person at every station understood this. Marcus adjusted the heat on his pan without looking up. Yolanda's hands continued their work. Deshawn kept calling the window. Nobody looked at the back entrance directly. Everyone knew. She was at the pass plating the duck confit when he stopped 2 feet behind her. Her hands didn't stop. He didn't lower his voice. He had never needed to lower his voice to be heard. He said, "You're done." Effective immediately. The kitchen didn't stop. Couldn't. Not with 8 people and 34 covers and 4 courses still running. But something traveled through the room the way a current travels through still water. Invisible. Complete. Impossible to pull back once it had moved. She set the duck, drew the sauce, set the brush down. Then she turned around. Suhan Lim was a man who had finished the decision before he walked through that door. Not angry. Not apologetic. The face of someone who had done all the accounting alone and in private and was now only here to close it out. Clean. Controlled. The face of a man who had been making decisions that cost him since he was 16 years old and had learned to close them out without leaving a mark. She looked at him the way she looked at a sourcing problem. Complete clarity. No performance. She held his eyes for 4 seconds. Then she turned back to the pass. She picked up the seasoning spoon. She had been making the short rib for 18 months. She had made it on a Tuesday night alone in October when the kitchen was empty and nobody was watching, and she tasted it and set the spoon down and knew. She had made it through every service since. She had made the final adjustment to the braising liquid on Wednesday and written it down in the recipe box in her small precise handwriting. She knew this dish in the way that knowledge lives in the body after long enough. Not recalled. Just known. She tasted. She adjusted. A specific measure of finishing salt. Not a measurement in any book, a measurement that lived in her fingers and had lived there for 18 months of making this dish until her hands knew it the way her grandmother's hands had known things. Without hesitation, because 40 years of knowledge does not live in a book. She reached for the garnish. Placed it. Adjusted one element 2 millimeters towards center with the tip of the spoon. Not because the dish required correction. Because that was where it belonged and she knew it and her hands knew it, and there was no version of this plate that she would let leave the pass at anything less than exactly right. She stepped back. She looked at the plate. And the room, which had been pretending not to watch, stopped pretending. In 18 months working beside her, Yolanda had never seen Renee Okafor look at a finished plate the way she looked at this one. She smiled. Not at him. Not for the room. Not performed, not calculated. Not directed at any of the 8 people at their stations or the 34 covers in the dining room beyond the pass or the city pressing its ordinary Friday night against the windows outside. Just at the dish. The way you smile at something you have made that is exactly what you meant to make. When the work is true, which has never required an audience and has never needed one, and is not going to start needing one now. It was 4 seconds long. It was entirely private. It belonged to no one in that kitchen. It belonged to her. She set the spoon down. She untied her apron from behind. Folded it once. Twice. With the same deliberateness she had brought to everything she finished in this kitchen for 18 months. She set it on the pass. Not thrown. Not dropped. Folded. Complete. A chef's apron does not stay in the kitchen. Travels home. It gets washed. Comes back. Setting it here folded on the pass meant she was finished. Not leaving. Finished. The distinction was architectural. She looked at Deshawn. Fire the short rib. His jaw was tight. He nodded. She looked at the shelf above the pass. She reached up and took down the recipe box. This was not what anyone in the kitchen expected. The recipe box had lived on that shelf since month 1. It was hers. Everyone understood this, in the way the pass was hers, in the way the sourcing relationships were hers, in the way the specific knowledge of how to pull a broken sauce back from the edge in the last 30 seconds before service was hers. She set it on the pass beside the folded apron. She opened it. She spent 3 minutes at the pass going through it. Not removing anything. Not adding anything. Organizing. Tabs she had meant to clarify, she clarified. A contact number for the boat captain that was written on a post-it and not yet entered. She entered it in her handwriting in the correct place. A notation about the Heritage Pork delivery schedule that Deshawn had asked about twice. She found the relevant page and put a paper clip on it so it would open there first. She closed it. She set it on the pass, open side facing the kitchen so whoever needed it next could find it. She picked up her knife roll from the shelf where it had lived for 18 months. She walked to the back door. At the threshold, she stopped, not hesitating, just standing inside her kitchen for 3 more seconds, counting nothing, naming nothing, just standing inside the room she had built, in the last moments that it still belonged to her, and then it didn't. She walked out into the March night and the door closed and she was gone. Don't go anywhere. I mean it. What happens next? What Suhan does when he finds the recipe box is the part of this story that I have been thinking about for weeks. Stay with me. And if someone sent you this video, go subscribe right now. This channel is where stories like this live. Inside, nobody moved for full seconds. The ticket machine ran. The heat lamp stayed on. 34 people in the dining room continued through their Friday evening, eating food she had designed and built a system to produce correctly in her absence, unaware that on the other side of the pass the chef who built it had just walked out of it for the last time. Then Deshawn fired the short rib. Marcus called his fish. Yolanda placed her garnish. The kitchen kept moving because she had built it to keep moving. Every system, every station, every decision made from what was true and working outward so that the room could function at the standard she required even when she wasn't in it. She had built a kitchen that didn't need her present to be right. She had left the instructions for everything she knew. She had walked out into the March night with her knife roll and left the recipe box open on the pass. Suhan stood in the kitchen for a moment. He looked at the folded apron. He looked at the recipe box. He looked at the back door. He picked up the recipe box. He carried it to the bar near the pass, where he had sat on Thursday nights watching a kitchen that wasn't his. He sat down. He opened it. To understand what Suhan Lim felt when he opened that recipe box, you have to understand something about his mother. Her name was Park Eun-hee. She had run a small Korean restaurant in a strip mall in Garland, Texas, for 12 years. Not a significant restaurant. Not a destination. A neighborhood place with 11 tables and a lunch special that the same 30 families ordered every week, and a kitchen that smelled like doenjang and sesame oil, and the particular warmth of a room that has been fed from consistently for a long time. It was the legitimate center of his family's life. The thing that was simply itself while everything else was complicated. When Suhan was 22, a rival family pressured the landlord. 15 days' notice. He watched his mother pack that kitchen in a single afternoon. Every piece of equipment wrapped in newspaper with the focused efficiency of a woman who had accepted something unacceptable and was not going to let anyone watch her break over it. She wrapped the earthenware pots she had brought from Seoul. She wrapped the stone bowls. She wrapped the knife she had used every day for 12 years, the one with the wooden handle worn smooth at exactly the place her hand rested. She packed everything. She loaded it. She locked the door. She never reopened. She said once to his father, "I could go somewhere else. But the recipes are in that kitchen." The way the light came through that window in the afternoon. The sound of that particular street. You can take the pots. You can't take the room. He had been 19 when she said this. He had filed it away without fully understanding it. He was 44 now, sitting at a bar in a kitchen he owned, holding a recipe box that belonged to a woman he had just fired, and he understood it with a completeness that arrived without warning and would not leave. She had given him the recipes. She had given him everything she knew, the braising ratios, the sourcing contacts, the notes about the boat captain, the plating diagrams in millimeters, the temperature at which the sauce broke and exactly how to pull it back, and she had given it without being asked, without negotiating, without conditions, without anger. She had organized it on her way out the door, in 3 minutes at the pass while Deshawn fired the last short rib of her tenure, so that whoever came next would have everything they needed to maintain the standard she had built. She had fired. She had been fired. And she had still refused to let the kitchen suffer for it. He turned a page. Her handwriting was small and precise and entirely legible. No abbreviations. No shortcuts. The knowledge she had spent 14 years accumulating, written out for a stranger, in a kitchen she was done with on a Friday night in March. He sat with this. He called Cho at 1:15 in the morning. He didn't ask a question. He said, "Is there another option for the problem?" Cho was quiet for a moment. Cho was not a man who offered options carelessly. Cho said, "The building on navigation." Move the visible operation there. Different name, different address. The people watching this building have no record of that one. He said, how long? Cho said, 6 weeks. Maybe 8. He said, the chef. Cho said nothing. He already knew what Cho's silence meant. The offer, if he made it, would come too late or too cold or from the wrong direction. A man who fires someone at 9:47 on a Friday night with 34 covers seated does not get to make a clean offer the following week. Some things, once done, are done in a way that cannot be restructured. He looked at the recipe box. He said, all right. He ended the call. He stayed at the bar until 2 in the morning. The kitchen broke down around him. Marcus and Yolanda and Deshawn worked clean and quiet and efficient, the way she had trained them to work, and none of them looked at the bar directly. Deshawn locked up without coming to the bar, which was a kind of mercy. The recipe box was still open in front of him. He was on the page about the short rib. The final entry, made 3 days ago. The half-ratio adjustment to the tamarind she had been circling for 2 months. Written out completely, in her small, precise handwriting, at 11:30 on a Wednesday night in the empty kitchen. She had written it knowing she would use it the next night. She had not known she was writing it for someone else. He closed the recipe box. He sat with the closed box in front of him and he thought about his mother packing her kitchen in Garland on a Tuesday afternoon 22 years ago, and he thought about the woman he had watched build a kitchen in this building for 18 months, and he thought about the sedan parked outside and the calculation he had run 3 times and the answer that had not changed. He had made the right decision. He knew this. The building was safer. The operation was safer. The men in the sedan had nothing to watch now. The calculation was correct. He was sitting alone in an empty restaurant at 2 in the morning holding a recipe box that a woman had organized on her way out the door as a gift to a kitchen she was never coming back to. And the calculation, which he had run 3 times and confirmed and acted on and would act on again in the same position with the same information, felt like the most expensive thing he had ever been right about. We are almost at the end. Before I finish, I want to ask you something. Not for the algorithm, because I'm genuinely curious. Have you ever done something correct that cost you something real? Not a mistake. A correct decision that you still couldn't fully sit with? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and the conversation down there is always better than the video. Subscribe if you haven't. And stay because the last 2 minutes of this story are the part 1 wrote last, and the part 1 think about most. He drove through Houston for an hour and a half. Not toward anything. Not with a destination. Just through the grid of the city at 2 in the morning. The ordered streets and the indifferent traffic lights and the particular texture of Houston at this hour, which has never once adjusted itself for anything anyone was carrying through it. He ended up in 3rd Ward. He had no reason to be in 3rd Ward. He didn't know this neighborhood. He had no business here, no building here, no calculation that required him to be on this particular street at this particular hour. He stopped. In a building on the near side of the block, 1 light was on. A ground floor space with a door propped open. Through the door, the sound of a commercial hood fan. The particular smell of a kitchen working late. Not cooking exactly, something between cooking and preparing. The smell of a space being set up for what it was going to become. In the lit doorway, a shadow at a work table. Someone sitting. Someone writing. He looked at the light for a long time. He thought about a woman who had spent 14 years learning that a kitchen could be taken and the knowledge in your hands could not. Who had been taken from 3 times before she was 38. Who had folded her apron twice on the pass of a kitchen she built and organized her recipe box for a stranger and picked up her knife roll and walked out into the March night without looking back. Who was, almost certainly, already starting again. He thought about his mother's restaurant. The earthenware pots wrapped in newspaper. The knife with the wooden handle. The room that could not be packed. He understood something, sitting in his car on that street at 2 in the morning, that he had not had the category for before tonight. What she had set on that pass was not just a recipe box. It was a demonstration of the kind of person she was, the kind of knowledge she carried, the kind of integrity that did not require an audience, that did not perform for the room, that functioned at its full standard even in the last 3 minutes of a tenure that had just been ended without explanation or justice. She had seasoned her last plate and smiled at it because it was right. She had given away everything she knew because the kitchen deserved continuity even if she didn't get it. She had walked out into the March night with her knife roll because the knowledge was in her hands and her hands were going with her. He could own the recipe box. He could not own what made it. He looked at the light in the window for a long time. Then he drove away. 3 months later, on a Tuesday in June, a small restaurant opened in 3rd Ward. No sign yet. 10 tables. A reservation line that started from nothing. The short rib was on the menu. Not his short rib. Not the recipe in the box he still had on the shelf in his office, the box he had never given to anyone, had never tried to replicate from, had left closed since the night he drove home from the empty restaurant and sat with what it had cost him to be right. Her short rib. Evolved. A version she had continued working on in the months between March and June, in whatever kitchen she had access to, on whatever Tuesday nights were available to her, with the specific discipline of a person who does not stop developing something just because the room that contained it has been taken away. The Chronicle ran a piece in July. He read it once, set his phone down, went back to what he was doing. The reservation line at her new place hit 6 weeks by August. He knew because Cho told him, the way Cho told him things that were not operationally relevant but that he had learned over 14 years the man needed to know anyway. He didn't respond to Cho. He thought about the light in the window. 3rd Ward. 2 in the morning. A woman at a table, writing. He thought about what it must have looked like from inside that room. The work in front of her, the hood fan running, the March night outside the prop door, the knowledge in her hands that had survived everything anyone had ever taken from her. And he thought, she probably didn't look up when the car stopped outside. She was already somewhere else. She was already building the next thing. She had been building it since she folded the apron. That's the story. The reservation line at her new restaurant hit 3 months by the end of the year. Suhan moved his visible operation to Navigation Boulevard. The men in the sedan stopped coming after 4 weeks. The calculation was correct. It is still the most expensive thing he has ever been right about. The recipe box is on a shelf in his office. He has never opened it again. He doesn't need to. He knows what's in it. He also knows what's not in it. The part that made it worth anything is in her hands. And her hands walked out the door on a Friday night in March with her knife roll, and have been working ever since.